is Carrie and I go to Stanborough Secondary School and I'm in Year 8. The things I really enjoy about the school is the Christian ethos and the fact that God is at the center of everything we do. I also really like the family environment the school has to offer. The teachers really care about the students and the students are all really nice to each other. The classes are also smaller than normal schools, so the teachers can help us more and work more one-to-one with us. The school also has a very good music program to offer. Everyone gets to learn how to play an instrument and all the teachers are professional. Why don't you come and join us?
Visit our website spsch.org or email info@spsch.org to find out how you can join the Stanborough family.
We are the computer and math specialists. You may think all we do on computers is play video games. Well, that's not the case. There are many tools such as search engine and coding apps. Coding apps help you create your own computer program, which may let you choose to add cool characters and funny backgrounds. May I invite you to join us here at Highland House School at our computer lesson.
In our computing lesson, we use an app called Espresso, where we digitally explore different subject areas and consolidate our learning creatively with exciting, interactive, multimedia activities.
Maths on the computer is fun, and this is why it's my favourite lesson. There are so many interesting topics to discover, like timetables, division, subtraction, addition, counting, and many more. For me, my favourite topics are 3D shapes and angles. Did you know almost everything in our day-to-day lives includes shapes? Okay, I have a fun game for you. So what you'll need to do is find the objects surrounding you and try to guess the correct shape, just like this rectangle.
I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. To develop your computer and math skills, you will need to work hard and never give up. Here at Highland House, I am working towards becoming an expert in this area so that one day I will become the CEO of my own computer engineering business. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for another exciting lesson of Highland House.
For me, the great outdoors does not necessarily mean going far and expensive for the experience. Look at this park, for instance. You can hear the hustle and bustle around me, yet this place still provides a place of tranquility for the great outdoors. I love my local parks that are open and allow me to experience my neighborhood as though I were out in the great countryside. Learning from my neighborhood, like this rich old tree bark behind me, tells of its history and journey of existence and endurance. Kind of reminds me of life in general. Our journeys may not be pretty, but are well worth it because we are still standing strong and are alive. That's why I'm taking part in Walk for ADRA, to lend a hand in the small way that I can, that someone else may feel uplifted through their life's journey. There are many families and communities who are living in abject poverty and are in distress. That's why we would love for you to join us as we walk the globe twice, collectively, and raise £50,000 for ADRA. You can walk in the park like I am, within your urban areas, out in the woods, out in the countryside, you name it. Walk with a friend, walk with family members, make it fun, make it your Walk for ADRA. Each time you walk, track your miles, share your journey with us. Together, let's walk to achieve our target, 50,000 miles for £50,000. Why don't you join us today and sign up to Walk for ADRA?
So please support Walk for ADRA this year. Go out, enjoy nature, alone, with your family, with your friends, and raise money for ADRA at the same time. Walk for ADRA.
you struggling to cope with life? Conflict, bereavement, fear, relationship, anger, depression, negative thoughts, trauma, and uncertainty can all cause emotional imbalance. Don't struggle alone. CCS, your trusted confidential counselling service, is here for you. Call our listening line on 03301 332 945. Our office line for appointments on 020 7723 8050, or visit our website www.ccscounselling.org.uk. Our counsellors speak various languages. CCS, a shoulder to lean on. We are here to listen.
So thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, those who are joining me from various platforms in various countries in the UK and all over the world. Thank you very much for being with me again today as we continue our study on health and healthy living. What are the principles that we can employ? What are the principles that we can use to keep us healthy? And over the last 2 days, we've introduced the 8 principles or laws of healthy living. Yesterday, we looked at the question of what was the original diet of man. And today, we want to look at the role of whole food, plant-based diet in preventing and reversing heart disease. So, we will just pick that up now and just give me a chance to share with you my screen. So, the power of plant-based nutrition to reverse chronic disease. Now, the last thing we said before we closed yesterday, we said that you are what you eat. We've tried to provide you with some data, provided you with some information on the biblical position of what the Bible teaches on what you eat. And we said there is the Adamic diet, the diet that consists of whole food, plant-based diet. There was the meat diet that was added as an emergency. Well, what do we know, in fact? Well, we know that many chronic illnesses are linked to what you eat, to diet. This has been very well documented in a number of medical journals. It continues to be published literally day by day. We are getting more and more scientific data, scientific literature, scientific publications on the link between diet and disease. We know that diet-related diseases are the leading cause of death in the United States and in the UK, and I would say in Australia. All the major Western countries that are following the Western diet, the data is becoming very clear that these diet-related diseases are the leading cause of death in these countries. There are over 27 medical conditions that have been directly linked to an unhealthy diet. Isn't that a scary thought? Over 27 medical conditions have been directly linked to an unhealthy diet. Let me share with you some of those things. So we know that diseases that are linked to an unhealthy diet would be hypertension and high blood pressure, Alzheimer's disease. These are all the leading causes of death we mentioned in the 2 lectures before, 2 days ago. Coronary heart disease, heart attacks, stroke, cerebrovascular diseases, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, arthritis in the bones and joints, sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, respiratory problems, lung problems, endometrial cancer, that's cancer of the uterus in females, breast cancer in females and in males, prostate cancer in men. These are things linked to an unhealthy diet. Colon cancer, dyslipidemia, which means you have high cholesterol or high lipids in your blood, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is an inflammation of the liver or because of a buildup of fat in the liver. Fat inflames the liver. insulin resistance leading to diabetes, asthma, hyperuricemia or gout is another word for that, reproductive problems, difficulty in reproduction, hormone abnormalities, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a problem of ovarian cysts and also hormonal, impaired fertility, inability to get pregnant, or to the sperm is not working, and then of course diabetes type 2, depression, anxiety, low energy levels and fatigue. We mentioned that as one of the causes of ill health in our second lecture or first lecture. Tooth decay, dental decay, acne, problem with the skin, digestive health issues. And as we mentioned before, digestive diseases and in the bowel in general, bowel health is turning out to be probably the most important organ that contributes to ill health and chronic disease. It's phenomenal, the material that is coming out. So at least 27 diseases are directly linked to diet. So what we are discussing over these next few days, before and now, is relevant. It's not only relevant, it's critical. Because many of us are digging our graves with our teeth. So what's the evidence? What's the evidence? Well, let me provide you with the evidence from what's called the Adventist health studies, because we want to provide you with data. So the reason that the Adventists were chosen, the ones that were chosen initially was in, I'll show you in a while, was in California, because Loma Linda is one of the centers where they have some of the longest living people in the world, living to over 100 years in good health. So Adventists are famous for longevity. The general Adventists live longer than most people in the general population, just happens to be the fact. And it is thought that this long lifespan is linked to up to 10 years longer, is linked to a number of factors, 5 behaviors. Number 1, not smoking. Number 2, eating a plant-based diet. Number 3, eating nuts several times a week. Regular exercise. Number 4, and maintaining a normal body weight. So those are the 5 things that have been known to cause the Adventist population all over the world, but this particular one was focused in California, Loma Linda. So they decided, let's study Adventist. So the Adventist church turns out to be one of the most fertile grounds for studies, because we have a population that is diverse enough to study differences in dietary outcomes, but at the same time have a standard population of people who do the same thing. We don't smoke, we don't drink, get exercise and so on. So they can rule out or move out all the confounding factors, and you can test only for diet. And so the Adventists, they've been 360 studies published over and growing on Seventh-day Adventists, because they are such a fertile ground for study. So the scientists and so on, they love to study the Adventist church because we don't smoke, and it makes our lifestyle choices much easier and clearer to understand. And of course, because there is a variation in the dietary habit, the dietary pattern within Adventists. You go from a strict vegetarian to somebody who eats a typical Western diet. So researchers have loved this because they can remove the confounding factors of smoking and alcohol and all this type of thing, and they can focus on what is the impact of diet on health and longevity. That's why the Adventist church and the Adventist people have been studied so rigorously over the many years. So there have been 2 big studies, which is called Adventist Health Study 1, or the AHS Study 1, which was between 1974 and 1988. So it's about an 14 or 18 year study. And it was those who were in California, it's in the green line here, that section there. Those who were studying between 1974 and 1988, 34,000 Adventists. Now, these are Seventh-day Adventists in California. And that became the basis of one study. And then there was a second study because of the results. They wanted to see, look, these are so startling results. What about if we studied further than this California? So the second study, which began in 2002 and is still ongoing, studied Adventists, so the Adventist Health Study 2, 96,000 people in the United States and Canada. Now, there are a number of sub-studies off of that, smoke study and the and the in particular is one of them, and the religion, how does religion impact your health? But the ones I want to focus on for the purpose of our conversation is, what about the results of the first study in California, over 34,000 Adventists, and what is the result of the study of the second study, ongoing, 96,000 Adventists in the United States and Canada? What were the results? So we're going to be looking at that. So the findings from these studies, and I'm just going to point out the findings rather than the details of the study. So in Adventist Health Study 1, the first one that was done with the 34,000 Adventists in California, they found when you looked, now remember, they have been able to rule out all the other confounding factors except diet. So that's the beauty of this. So they're saying what we are seeing is the result of dietary choices. Because some Adventists are strict vegans, some Adventists eat meat like it's going out of style, going out of fashion. So they can study the impact of diet on health very easily. So what did they find? Well, I'm going to show you here. When they looked at diet and fatal heart disease, you died from a heart attack, looking at Californians, so they found that Adventists who ate meat had a 64% chance of dying from heart attack. If they ate no meat but had milk and eggs, it would drop down to 40%. And if you look at pure vegetarian Adventists, people who only ate with vegetables, 23%. So 1/4 of the California population. So California, 100%. The normal people do whatever they want. But when you compare, so by being an Adventist, even if you ate meat, you dropped your chance of dying from a heart attack by 1/3. If you ate no meat but had milk and eggs, you dropped it by 60%. You're down to 40%. And if you're a pure vegetarian, 23%. So quite amazing to show that the change in, just simply a change in diet can show you a change in outcome. Here's another one. Look at the risk of prostate cancer. So for an SDA meat eater, you had the same risk of getting prostate cancer. But look at the dietary difference if you were a SDA lacto-ovo vegetarian. So that's not even looking at a vegan. These are lacto-ovo vegetarian, LOV, are ones who would drink milk and eat eggs. And yet you were able to show a 35% drop in the risk of prostate cancer simply by not eating meat. Here's colon cancer. Again, one of the leading causes of death in the Western world. Look at the Adventist who eats meat, the SDA meat eater, 100%. In other words, his risk is pretty high as compared to the risk of colon cancer for a lacto-ovo vegetarian, 55%. Half the risk. You've halved the risk of getting colon cancer by simply eating meat. But there's still an element of eggs and milk that seem to contribute to the prostate cancer. Now, look at the weight differences. This is one of the big struggles that people are having. Everybody's have all these various diets. Every day somebody comes on the TV and says, take my tablet or take my diet or juice diet and run diet and walk diet and all sort of diet and biscuit diet and everything. But the point is, if you look at the study, which is what you need to do, and in this study, what you're going to see, there's the vegans, which is the Greek. So these people use no meat, no milk, no eggs. You have the lacto-ovo vegetarians, the second line. You have the pesco-vegetarians. So pesco-vegetarian would eat fish. You have the semi-vegetarians, which means to say they might eat a little meat now and then. And then you have the non-vegetarians who eat meat all the time. And if you look at the difference in the weight, both male and female, the difference between the meat eater, 180, and the vegan is about 30, these are in pounds, 30 pounds is about 60 kilos or 64 kilos. So just look at that. The same meat eater, this is female, and in the next part of the graph is male, and you see it as well, 193 pounds weight for the meat eater, and 161 for a vegan. A 30 pound or 64 kilo difference by simply changing your diet from a meat diet to a vegan diet. And it's funny, you see the step downs, as people eat less meat, their weight drops. So you want to lose weight, the answer is easy. you need to stop eating the meat. You need to go, no, that's not right. You need to go to a whole food, plant-based diet. Now, I'm going to be discussing that. So don't run away now. Now is a good time to stay, because we're going to be discussing that being not eating meat is not the same as a whole food plant-based diet. It's not the same thing. Now, here's another one. Look at high blood pressure. People reporting high blood pressure. Again, look at the vegan, the green one at the end, and you look at the meat eater, the orange one, the block white at the top, and look at the difference. Again, a step down ladder. The less meat you eat, the lower your blood pressure. Or put it another way, the more meat you eat, the higher your blood pressure. And the difference is between 5 and 25%. That's quite significant. That's quite significant. 25% of people reporting versus 5% reporting. 25% of those who are meat eaters reporting blood pressure. Now remember, these are all Adventists. And 5% who are vegans reporting blood pressure problems. Very significant. Look at cholesterol. Another big problem. People have problems with blood pressure. They have problems with cholesterol, high cholesterol and so on. And again, look at it. It is absolutely startling. A complete step down, going from the meat eater, which is the brown one, down to the vegan here, whose cholesterol is normal, low, if anything. So the difference is quite startling scientifically. The more meat you eat, the higher cholesterol. The less meat you eat, the lower your cholesterol. Again, this is not people taking drugs. This is simply a dietary choice, a choice to eat certain diets. And you can see the change in the blood pressure, change in the incidence of cancers, prostate cancer, change in the incidence of high blood pressure, change in the incidence of cholesterol, simply by making a choice of the type of diet you eat. So does that make a difference? Yes, it does. Look at diabetes, another big problem in the Western world. We mentioned all of these as leading causes of death. And diabetes type 2 now, we're discussing those who are non-insulin dependent or insulin dependent diabetes type 2. And again, look at the vegans, the green one down at the end, and look at the meat eaters up at the top. The more meat you eat, the higher the incidence of diabetes is. You see, diabetes is not primarily a sugar problem. Diabetes is a problem related to meat. That's just a fact. I'm giving you the information in front of you. I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to create an idea here. That's just the facts we have. The more meat you eat, the higher the incidence of diabetes in the population. Here is a 29-year follow-up of white Seventh-day Adventists in the Adventist Health Study 1, the first study that was done. And they looked at the BMI. That's basically a measure of your weight, the body mass index, and the risk of death, which is on the y-axis. So x-axis is the body mass index. The heavier you are, the more obese or overweight you are. And look at the lines that it shows, both male and female, white one. So they've removed the element of genetics out of it by not doing Hispanics and blacks and greens and whites and so on, just one group. And it's very clear that the more your BMI just means the heavier you are, the more weight you have, the higher your incidence or risk of death is. And that was published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society. These are all published studies. The more your weight, the higher your incidence of dying from all causes. Now, so that was the Adventist Health Study 1, the first one that was done back in the 1990s and finished, a 14-year study, 1974 to 1996. This is the second one that started in 2002 and is currently ongoing. So the data is currently constantly going on. And this is just to mention that there are different types of dietary among the Adventist group. You have the vegans, the lacto-vegetarians, the pescos who will eat fish. They will eat cheese and milk. You have the semi-vegetarians who will eat a little bit of meat. And then, of course, the meat eaters will eat everything. So those are just the various groups that were being recorded. Again, look at weight. And this has been repeated a second time. And you have the vegans, 141. And you have the meat eaters, the red one, 180. Again, look at that. It's a 40-pound difference, almost 80 kilos of weight simply by a change of diet. That's a choice of diet, not necessarily change of diet, but a choice of diet. And again, you see, it's confirmed by the step down. So the less meat you eat, the lower your weight, or the more meat you eat, the heavier you weigh. This data is uncontradictable. You cannot contradict the data. Look at, this is again the dietary status and weight, and now they break it down to look at lactovers and semis and meat. Again, you're seeing it, and this is again, you know, this is male and female, so you could see the male on the left, the female on the right. Again, look at the difference, at least a 30 to 40 kilo difference, 40 pound difference, or 80 kilo difference. So you could lose 80, you could literally be 80 kilograms lighter because of a choice of the diet you eat. The whole food plant versus meat, an 80 kilogram difference. Look at diabetes. Again, remember, this is the second study. It's confirming what the first study has said. So this is not a fluke. This is a consistent report that is good. Remember, these things are ongoing almost 20 years. 14 years in the first one, is ongoing almost 20 years already. And the data is still saying the same thing. Look at diabetes. Again, you have an incidence of 1.6% in those who are vegans, the green, and you have about a 6% incidence to those who are diabetic. So those who are meat eaters. Significant data. And again, stepwise down. The more meat you eat, the higher incidence of diabetes. Confirming the point that diabetes is a protein problem as well. It's a protein problem, meat problem. Diet and status of cholesterol. Look at cholesterol. Again, look at the same one. If you're a vegan, 3%. If you're a meat eater, 15%. Your cholesterol is dependent on your dietary. The more meat you eat, the more your cholesterol will be high or elevated. And so if you look at Dr. Dennis Burkitt was the one who found the Burkitt's lymphoma. He did a lot of his time he spent in Africa. And he was the one that looked at the difference between the diet of the African native versus the white Caucasian who came to work in Africa, and you know, the type of stool and on. He did quite a few studies, but he was the one that picked up the Burkitt's lymphoma, you know, that you know he's well celebrated for. But here is what he documented. He said the greatest medical discovery of the last 20 years was the understanding that our Western disease, but as our modern chronic diseases, are largely lifestyle related and therefore must be preventable and potentially reversible. And he laid it right on. He says the lifestyle diseases the Western diseases we are seeing, all this diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, heart disease, all that sort of thing, he says are largely lifestyle choices and therefore can be reversed. Potentially. He was correct. So what we do know in science, and what I will try to prove again over the next few days, is that a whole food, plant-based diet can prevent and reverse many of the chronic diseases that we are seeing currently. A whole food, plant-based diet, can I say it again, can prevent and reverse, not just prevent, can reverse many of the chronic diseases that we are currently seeing. Those are the facts. Let me just close this evening by giving you what is a whole food plant-based diet. What exactly, when we say what is a whole food plant-based diet, what exactly are we talking about? Well, we know that your body requires certain elements for good nutrition. It needs carbohydrates, it needs proteins, it needs fats, it needs vitamins and minerals, they need enzymes to digest your food, and you need water. So water is an element of nutrition, a very important one too. Carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals, enzymes, and water. And so for the whole food, we don't use this USDA pyramid anymore. There's no such thing as a pyramid. That's no longer existing. Here are the new 4 food groups that define what a whole food plant-based diet is. And this is essentially what we should be eating. They have the whole grain, like your amaranth, your buckwheat, your barley, your oats, and your rye. They are the vegetable groups. That's the second group. So the first one was the whole grains. Second one is your vegetable groups. We have your starchy vegetables like potato, sweet potato, butternut squash, and so on. You have your non-starchy ones like your green leafy vegetables, your tomatoes, eggplants, and cucumbers. So you have your whole grains, your vegetables. That's your second group, is your vegetable group. The third group is your legumes, your beans, your peas, and your lentils. That's where you're going to get all the protein. And there's no problem of getting protein in the whole food plant plant-based diet. Then you have fruits of all sizes, shapes, and colors. That's this group up here. Fruits of all sizes, shapes, and colors. And then finally, you have seeds and nuts. Those are the elements or the 4 food groups. I've added seeds and nuts at the end, but it's whole grain, vegetables, legumes, fruits, seeds, and nuts, which are now considered the food groups, the dietary pattern for somebody who is on a whole food, plant-based diet. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. There's no mystery. You don't need to do a PhD. That's all the information you need to know. And you can follow this to a pattern of good health. So you have the breads and cereals, so which provide the complex now remember, it's complex carbohydrates what you're looking for. Whole grains, cereals, brown rice, and so on. And the importance of the whole grain is that it contains the endosperm and the bran, and the germ, rather than just taking off all of that and throwing it in the bin, which is what white flour does. You want the whole grain. Fruits and vegetables provides healthier body weight, lower blood pressure, less risk of diabetes, less risk of certain cancers, better digestion, better heart health, clear skins, shiny hair. All of those come from the benefits of fruits and vegetables. Legumes, including beans, lentils, peanuts, gives you fiber, folic acid, potassium, iron, and it gives you all the protein that you need as an alternative to animal foods. You get more than enough protein. You need 0.5 grams per kilogram body weight. You don't need a whole lot of protein at all, and I'll show you that in a minute. Fats, they occur naturally from plant food. You get a good source of fats from whole grains, from nuts, from beans, from seeds, from avocados, from olives. They will provide with all the fats you need. You don't need to use processed oils. There's the whole food plant-based diet does not have processed oils in it at all, whether it is be corn oil or canola oil or olive oil or any type of oil. It is based without oils because all the oils can come naturally from whole food. The concept is a whole food diet. Now, what is the difference, therefore, between a whole food plant-based diet, a vegan diet, and a vegetarian diet? Now, remember I said that what I'm teaching you is a whole food plant-based diet. No, I'm not saying talking about vegan. The vegan diets may be whole food plant, but they don't have to be. Let me show you about what I mean by that. So we have all different types of vegetarians. You can have a raw food vegan. You can have a vegan who eats fruits and veggies. You can have a lacto-ovo vegetarian. He has fruits, veggies, and will have dairy or milk. You can have an ovo-vegetarian, which is somebody who eats fruits, vegetables, but also eggs. You can have a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which means they eat fruits and vegetables, but they also use dairy and eggs. You can have a pescatarian, which means they eat all of those, but they also include seafood or fish. And then you have a flexitarian, which means that they eat all of that, but sometimes they eat meat as well. It's called a flexitarian. So they're all different types. That's what I'm saying. Just to say somebody's a vegetarian or vegan, that means nothing. It could mean a lot. So it could mean a lot of things. It could mean that you eat a little bit of meat. It could mean that you eat fish. It could mean that you eat eggs. You drink milk. Or it could mean none of them. So there are different types of vegetarians, and the diet that God is created as an ideal diet is a whole food plant-based diet. That's what it is, a whole food plant-based diet. You can be a vegan or a vegetarian and not necessarily be healthy. Let me say that again. You can be a vegan or a vegetarian and not necessarily be eating a healthy diet. Let me show you why. Here is a vegan diet in front of you in that slides. You could be eating for breakfast, 3 or 4 slices of white bread and vegan butter. Then for midday snack, you have some Oreos, because Oreos are vegan. The content is vegan, and some orange juice. For lunch, you have some vegan pizza, and then you could have some French fries. And for dessert, you could have a handful of gummy bears and a can of Coke. Now, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, that is a vegan diet. That is a vegan diet, which means to say, I'm not saying that's a good vegan diet. I'm just saying that's an unhealthy. But you can eat that and call yourself a vegan. You can eat what I've just said here and call yourself a vegan. You're not eating any meat. But that is not a healthy diet. So I don't like using the word vegan or vegetarian. I prefer to say you are operating on a whole food, plant-based diet. That's a very different conversation. I gave you the 4 food groups already. So the big question many people ask is, can I get enough protein if I don't eat meat? That's what a lot of people ask. If I don't eat meat, can I get enough protein? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. You don't need that much protein to function. If you look at vegetarian animals who don't eat meat at all, look at the gorilla, look at the elephant, look at the buffalo, the bison, look at a horse. They are all vegetarian. Nobody can say that those animals are not getting enough protein. It's ridiculous. They are. Look at, I gave you some examples of vegan athletes and bodybuilders. Look at these people that you're seeing there in the slide are all vegans, whole food, plant-based diet. And nobody can say to me that they're not getting enough protein in their body. Anybody who tells you that's not telling the truth. There is no protein deficiency in vegan athletes at all. So the answer is yes, you can get more than enough protein. A whole food, plant-based diet, therefore, you eat real food. You eat food that your grandparents will recognize. Not half of the things we eat, 3/4 of them, your grandparents wouldn't know what they are. Packed and popped and cradled and put in tins and bags. No, you don't even know what it is. So eat food that is real food. Number 2, eat food that is as natural and minimally processed as possible. Minimal processing. I'm telling you what a whole food plant-based diet is. Number 3, don't eat so much food that you overeat. When you're satisfied or satiated, stop. Don't wait until you have to undo your belt buckle. Then you've eaten too much. And a whole food plant-based diet is eating mostly plants. You're eating mostly plants. And that's really what the diet is. That's the diet that God had ordained for us. It's healthier. It betters your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, prevents heart disease and diabetes. It may slow the progression of some cancers. It improves chronic illnesses like gout and rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis. There is data supporting all of this. This is actual fact. These things can reverse many of the diseases we are seeing. We can show even now, this is a good book by Dr. Colwell Esselstyn, and he's a cardiologist, and he took a cardiac surgeon actually, and he took people who were sent to him who were given up. They were walking dead, and they were going to die. Nothing could work for them, and he put them on a whole food plant-based diet, and that's reported in this book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And he shows where, look at that spot, there's a blockage, complete blockage of the artery, that literally within 6 months to 12 months, the artery had reopened. And what made the difference? He put them on a whole food, plant-based diet. So I'm giving you the facts and the information from science. You don't need to guess. You don't need to think that I'm making this up. This is not a word coming from me. I'm giving you the data to support what God said was true, is the truth. So in summary, we are not doing well as a nation in terms of our health, spending billions of dollars and billions of pounds, and people are still becoming iller and sicker and filling up more hospitals. Medicines and procedures and surgeries are not the answer. We're just mopping up the floor. That's all we're doing. We're not turning off the tap where the problem is. To treat a problem, if we want to treat the problems we've got to adopt a whole food, plant-based diet and a lifestyle that is based on minimally processed fruits, and minimally processed grains and vegetables. We've got to go towards minimal processing. A whole food diet has the potential not only to prevent disease, but also to reverse many of diseases like heart disease and diabetes. So how do you get this? Keep reading, keep listening, keep attending the classes. The number of good movies like Folks with Knives and What the Health. Clear out your kitchen, remove from it foods that are not plant-based. Get it out, put it in a bag, throw it in the bin. Stock your kitchen with whole food, plant-based foods. Plan your meals in advance so you don't end up snacking on wrong things. And of course, get somebody who can share it with you, who can support you, and be resilient. You don't have to do it all in one go. Keep trying. So whole food, plant-based life is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of living. And I want to encourage you into the whole food plant-based program. And for you right now, you're standing at the crossroads. Again, health is a matter of choice. It's a change of lifestyle. If you want to be healthy, you have to choose to be healthy. If you're just going to follow the pattern and follow what everybody else is doing, particularly the sad diet, the standard American diet or the sad diet, you will get very sad and sick. Life is about to change. It can either be a memorable life or an average life. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, the choice is yours. But I want to encourage you to choose a memorable life. And my desire for you, as I close every time, is, beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. Tomorrow, I'll ask you to invite you to join me again. We'll be dealing on the subject, lifestyle secrets of the healthiest people in the world. Why it is some people are living longer and healthier than other people. I want to explore and unpackage what are the lifestyle secrets of the healthiest people in the world. Until then, may God bless you, and thank you very much for your time.
Pastor Adrian Peck, we are just so thankful that you've accepted to be one of our speakers for this camp meeting 2021. We say welcome to you.
Thank you.
Pastor Peck, many may not be aware of you or where you minister. Can you just tell us, where are you currently serving right now, please?
So yes, I'm here on the Isle of Wight, and we are doing a church plant here. The conference has invested in a building, and so I'm here getting to know people in the community and starting to make connections and building on the people that we already have here to establish more of a presence than we maybe have had before, to try and bring the gospel to the people of the island.
Sounds exciting. Sounds exciting. Pastor Peck, how long have you been in ministry? How long have you been serving in your present district? Can you share that with us, please?
Yes, I've been in pastoral ministry for coming up to 7 years, and I've been here on the island coming up to 3 years.
Okay.
Yes, it's been an interesting journey for the last 3 years on the island and 7 years altogether. Before that, I was in Norwich and King's Lynn.
All right. Okay. Yeah. In your ministry, Pastor, can you tell us, is there a passion that you have? Is there a specific area of ministry where you have sensed God's call on your life?
Sure. I think for me, the possibilities that lie within a church community for bringing about transformation within the wider community is something that I think is so needed in society, especially where we see people struggling with loneliness and with a disconnect, with families breaking down. I think if we can establish our churches as a beacon of light in terms of connecting to others, but doing it within the context that we are the body of Christ, that we are here because of what Jesus has done for us. I think that's what makes church transformational and exciting.
Lovely. That's wonderful. And Pastor, do you have a family? Can you tell us about your family, please?
Yes, I have a wife, Melody, not Melanie, Melody. So I call her Mel. She's an accounts assistant, and she's been working on the island since we got here, basically. And the other member of our family is our cat, Tabitha.
Lovely. And of course, Pastor Peck, your dear mother has been serving in the South England Conference for many years. All our pastors are aware of Mrs. Pauline Peck, who has served in the Treasury Department for many years. And so we give God thanks for you and your family. Pastor Peck, we look forward to hearing God's word from you. Be assured of our prayers as you speak to us. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. So, the other day I was driving home when I noticed that a small crowd had gathered near to where I live, and there was a fire engine there, and there was obviously something going on. And immediately I became nosy. Now, I think being nosy is part of the human condition. We like to call it curiosity because that sounds better. So I was there, and as I drove past, I was craning my neck to see if I could see what was going on and looking in my mirrors, but no. Normally, I guess, you would have to satisfy your wanton nosiness by stopping and maybe going speaking to one of the spectators or seeing if you can get a view of what's going on for yourself, or maybe search out for that one neighbour who always has their ear to the ground. But here I knew that I just had to wait to go online, and there I would find the story. And there it was. A couple of men were up high on a cherry picker, a kind of crane thing, and the safety mechanism kicked into place, and they got stuck, hence the fire brigade. Here, as was mentioned in the introduction, is the Isle of Wight, an island off the south coast of England. And I was told very early on, that this is an island where everyone knows everyone else and everyone is in everyone else's business. Partly this is because the island is only 23 miles wide and about 13 miles north to south, so it can feel like we're all in each other's pockets. But in reality, not strictly true. The island covers 150 square miles and has over 140,000 people living here. But in spirit, I understand where they were coming from. Local Facebook groups, they can be hives of gossip and nosiness. Everything that can be news is news. This literally is everything from a fire in a bin to the proverbial cat caught up the tree. Now, this may sound somewhat negative, even suffocating, but here's the thing. When it comes to a sense of ownership, and I've said this in other places, when it comes to a sense of community, I have never known anywhere like here. I've met people over the last 2 or 3 years who volunteer for Age UK, work in charity shops, help run the Scouts, get involved in loneliness defeating projects like Men in Sheds, run health walks, volunteer at the zoos, do beach cleans, public garden maintenance, organise feeding programmes, children's projects. You get the idea. The level of community activity on the island and the sense of community, of a community that wants to help others and contribute towards community is frankly amazing. And this might get us thinking about community and what that actually means. Because the themes chosen by the SEC are making disciples and building communities. And much has been said and written about making disciples, but I want to think a bit about the community aspect today. What do we even mean by building communities, and which communities are we even talking about? Do we mean, for example, the communities in which our buildings are located, the areas surrounding where our services happen, where you can see shop owners and post people and police officers, taxi drivers, stereotypical unruly teenagers and cantankerous pensioners, the people out there beyond the boundaries of our buildings? Because in my experience, when we use the word community, that is who we are usually referring to. Very rarely do we talk about ourselves in terms of a community. We don't really mean us. And there's an issue with that I will just mention in passing. And that is to see them out there as the community and ourselves in here as the church. That immediately artificially separates us from our communities. It's as if we believe we can exist in splendid isolation in our own reality. But are we prepared? Are we prepared to think about what it means to look at our churches as communities within and part of our local communities? To see them as more than buildings where services take place, And in doing so, we will be able to see what impact that has on our communities and the role that we have to play. One of the greatest expositions on what a church community should be like is found in the middle of Paul's letter to the Philippians. The passage in question runs from chapter 1, verse 27 through to chapter 2, verse 16. And there are several moments that stand out, but the phrase that most often seems to be quoted, in my experience at least, comes in verse 12. This is where Paul tells his church to work out your own salvation in fear and trembling. Work out your own salvation in fear and trembling. It's a verse that can lead to a certain anxiety and panic, right? In fact, when it's quoted, that is often the speaker's desired response. Because this is where Paul appears to be laying it all on the line for us. We have to take this salvation thing seriously, he appears to be saying. We have to get our noses to the grindstone. This is no laughing matter. We need to get to it. We need to work at it. What Paul also seems to be saying is that when it comes to one of the big issues in life, if not the biggest issue in life, you and I, we're on our own. Work out your own salvation, he says. And this is a really big moment, if so. It's Paul telling us that it's all down to us. It's all down to me and no one else. And this makes sense, doesn't it? Because can someone else accept Jesus as Lord of my life for me? No. Can someone else develop a relationship with Jesus on my behalf? I don't think so. Can someone else pray, fast, tithe, serve in my place, and I somehow still get the credit? Absolutely not. And after all, if we think about the labourers in the vineyard in Matthew chapter 20, they may not all have to work the same length of time, but they have to work. So I don't play golf very often nowadays. So when I do play, let me tell you, it is ugly. About a year or two ago, I was playing here on the island with a couple of friends, and we were exposed high up on a very windy hill on a very windy day. In fact, it was one of those days and situations that was spectacular in its own way. A day where you could see the weather coming from miles away, speeding across the Solent from Dorset and Hampshire towards where we were standing. And we breathed sighs of relief as storm clouds sped past to the north and to the south, drenching the ground beneath them with cold, penetrating rain. But then the inevitable happened. We could see a cluster of dark, foreboding clouds coming directly towards us. There was no two ways about it. If we didn't find cover, we were going to be soaked to the skin. Now, the thing is, we wanted to finish the round and get off the course as quickly as possible. We were on a schedule that day. So we carried on for as long as what we thought was possible. But then it was too late. The already strong wind suddenly went up a couple of notches on the Beaufort scale. The drops of rain attacked horizontally, stinging already cold cheeks, made worse by the abrupt drop in temperature. I shouted to my companions, "Let's get behind there," pointing to a small hillock to our left, which would hopefully shelter us a bit from the storm. One followed, one did not. And perhaps the one that didn't hear my words that were whipped away by the wind before they got to him. And as we made for cover with my now solitary companion, he shouted to me, "What about Russ?" I responded, "It's too late for him now. He's on his own. Let's save ourselves." Now, I must point out that I said this mostly in jest, but also it was partly true. So the two of us sprinted to the aforementioned hillock, ducked down and cowered and trembled beneath an inadequate umbrella as the storm raged around us. So, if Ross chose not to follow us, what else could we do? I wasn't going to grab him by the scruff of his neck and force him into finding shelter and salvation from the storm. He was on his own. He was working out his own path. He had made his bed and he had to lie in it. And that's the way it should be, right? And there's a certain comfort, I think, to be had in taking this on board. You see, I can be sat there in a church service and I can look along the row of chairs or the pew in which I am sat, and I can know that I am not responsible for Rachel, Rose's or Russ's salvation. And that's a relief, because I have enough of a burden working out my own. And I may have brotherly and sisterly love for them, and I might ask in passing on a Sabbath day, how are you doing? I may even feed, shelter or clothe them, but when it comes to the question of eternal existence, they're on their own, just as Paul appears to be suggesting here. And this might all mean I have to make some big decisions. Just suppose it's one of those days and I'm sat there and I'm in a Bible study or a Sabbath school class and I'm just not feeling it. The same people are saying the same stuff over and over and over and over again. Old Mr. Smith has mounted his high horse again. Sister Jones has metaphorically ascended her soapbox. And I'm sat there listening to all this once again with my salvation on the line. And by the end, that salvation is no nearer. Worse, it feels further away. And now I've moved into the worship service. And I've almost had enough by the time the announcements are done with, the interminable announcements are done with. But then the music starts, and the music doesn't really move me either. The notes and words just bounce inanely off the walls. The music's too noisy or not noisy enough, too old or too new. There's too little of it or too much. And the preacher, he delivers monotonously in a monotonous drone. And I'm sat there with my salvation and eternal destiny in peril. And what's going on in front of me? Well, I easily come to the conclusion, this isn't helping me at all. So what am I going to do? What should I do? Well, I'm going to be working out my own salvation. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to up sticks and leave and be on the lookout for a church community that has Bible classes that enrich rather than fossilize. I'm on a mission to find a speaker who grabs my attention, who challenges me and helps me grow. I'm after a worship band or maybe a 17th century organ, depending upon my taste, that will produce music that will elevate me heavenward. And if I'm to work out my own salvation, I have no choice but to do this. No one else is going to do it for me when reading Paul this way. No one else is going to push my buttons. And so I'm off because I must. After all, working out your own salvation means at the end of the day, looking after number one, me. Doesn't it? You see, if I have to take sole responsibility for working out my own salvation, I must abandon you in a heartbeat if things don't suit me. I must move on, even if you're depending upon me, because above everything else, I am depending upon me. And I may have obligations and a sense of accountability where this group of people is concerned. But this all pales in comparison to the obligations and accountability I have directed inwards to me. But here's a question. What sort of community could result from reading Paul this way? It almost goes without saying. Barely any community at all. Reading Paul this way would potentially result in a church community where the pews are filled with souls who are, shall we say, agitated. Agitated because their goal of working out their salvation is unfulfilled. Agitated because they are filled with a sense of unease, wondering if they have made it. They're sat there asking themselves, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Have I worked hard enough? Have I not done some work I ought to have done? Is my trembling and fear at a sufficient level? Is this really what Paul intended for his church there in Philippi? Well, if so, there's a problem we have to solve. Reading the phrase this way and taking it to its logical, if ridiculous conclusion, it means we arrive in a place where we are out of sync with what else Paul is saying in this passage in Philippians. Because in Philippians 1:27, Paul doesn't describe a community that abandons everyone to their individual fate. He rather speaks of people who are standing firm in one spirit, who are striving, dare we say, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel. And he moves forward with that theme of being with one mind as we move into the next chapter, where in verse 2 he tells us that same one mind is about having the same love and being in full accord, and dare we forget, being of one mind. In verse 3, he goes on to say, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. And we might wish to have Paul on speed dial at this point. So we can say to him, yeah, but and that's all very nice. I really appreciate what you're saying. But what about the hard stuff? This is all a bit fluffy. What about the hard stuff like working out my own salvation? How is this going to be possible when I put others' interests above my own, especially my interest in where I'm going to spend eternity? But Paul hasn't finished yet. He's moved to describe that one mind for us. And we might pause for breath here, because he goes deep. You see that one mind, that same mind, that is the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, he tells us in verse 5. And if we're still not sure what that is about, Paul says, hold my hat and let me unpack that for you. He encourages us to look to Jesus, to look to Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but rather emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death. Even death on a cross. Oh, that mind. That way of thinking that lays it all on the line for others, even if it means leaving the glory and safety of the heavenly realm, even if it means going from being constantly praised by angels to taking the form of a slave and being despised, even if it means being cast in human form forever and being scarred for life, even if it takes an unparalleled level of humility to do all this, even as others are put first and everything is given on their behalf and death results. That mind. Do you know, every time I read this passage, I am profoundly struck by the implications for we who read it and might even allow ourselves to be changed by it. But I'm also struck by the absurdity. It is absurd because we can still meet people. We might even be those people who won't even give up their favourite seat in the church building in the interests of others. We can be the people who, rather than lay down our lives, lay down hymn books and Bibles and study guides to save our seats for the second service. We can be the people who would rather fight and battle over our preferred style of music, give in to being someone who chooses music based on culture and upbringing and tastes, rather than music based on the interest of others and elevating them heavenward. I can be the sort of person who is more interested in how the sermon impacts me than Russ and Rosie and Rachel sat next to me. We can easily find that we are the sort of people who get to church early in the interest of finding the best parking spaces, rather than leaving those spaces free in the interests of others. We can run the church programs in the comfy way we always have, Same times, same basic format, same lack of continuing irrelevancy, rather than bring something potentially fresh and new and vibrant and, yes, uncomfortable, but all in the interests of others. This is all absurd. This is absurd because never mind all that big stuff that Jesus did for us in leaving heaven to become a slave and die on our behalf. By comparison, if we're honest, sometimes we struggle to leave our beds on a Sabbath morning because it's a bit cold and rainy outside. I'm profoundly challenged because this mind of which Paul speaks, it's more than about going out of my way sometimes. It's more than being slightly inconvenienced on occasions. It's more than reaching into my pocket and doling out some spare change to solve my conscience. The reason I am profoundly struck and challenged by this passage is it suggests that the sort of church community that Paul is hoping for is one where the members of that community hold nothing back, hold nothing in reserve on behalf of others. Paul continues this wonderful description of Jesus up to verse 11. I'll leave you to read the rest of that for yourselves. But the very next verse after this amazing description of Jesus is verse 12, where we find that Paul writes, "Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." And so this just adds to the absurdity. This is just after he has raised the bar of what it means to be part of a community that stands shoulder to shoulder, embodying empathy and humility, a community that gives everything for everyone else, a community where others are the top priority, a community where God's mission takes precedence over tradition and form and my agenda. And yet here's Paul placing something at the very top of my agenda, saying, work out your own salvation in fear and trembling, Adrian. To my mind, he cannot be talking about this everyone for themselves approach. He can't be. One of the challenges we face when reading the Bible is we approach it with particular questions in mind. We're almost conditioned in that way. So, for example, the temptation is to read the Bible so that I can tell other people what to do. So we can read it to load up on some ammunition to fire at others. You need to work out your own salvation in fear and trembling, young man, as I was told when I was growing up in the church. We can also, for example, read it as if it's just for me. We can have our own personal questions and personal concerns. So we can be there flicking through the pages of the Bible, frantically trying to see if it can help us out of this pickle into which we have gotten ourselves. We can also join, for example, the rich young ruler who asked Jesus, how can I inherit eternal life? We can approach the Bible with the question as to how I can get to be saved. I'll leave you to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of those approaches. But here's the thing. We might ask how the Bible speaks to them and to me, but how about reading it and asking, how does it speak to us? To us. To read the Bible collectively from within community for community. If we don't do this, the problem can be seen clearly when seeking to understand the phrase, work out your own salvation. Because if we only approach the Bible to understand what it means for them and for me, then it makes so much sense that Paul is telling us to work out our own salvation as individuals. You be over there working out your salvation, I'll be over here working out mine. But if we read this as a community, where might that take us? Every day of his life after he retired, John Hughes went and checked telephone kiosks and parking meters for loose change. He would also pick up used tickets on buses and at bus stations in order to claim refunds. He ate a meal at a cost of £2 every lunchtime in a community centre. He would travel by train, but that's because he had a free pass. He was also known to cycle, but he never drove anywhere because he never owned a car. According to those in the know, he only ever went on one holiday in his final 30 years of his life. What seemed a rather sad life ended in 2009 when he collapsed pushing a bike across a railway bridge. His friend suggested he might have refused to seek medical help in case it cost him. Now, one might think that John barely had 2 pennies to rub together, picking up loose change here and there in an attempt to scrape by. In his will that was published a year or so later, however, he left behind not 1, but 2 houses and around £1 million. Everyone liked John, said his friend. He was a classic case of the millionaire who lived like a pauper. We miss him. And I suppose most of us felt sorry for him for the way he led his life when he had no need to. It's sad. He couldn't help it. Ronald Reed was a former petrol station attendant and caretaker. He was a private, modest man who lived in a suitably modest 2-up, 2-down house. He was a man who wore faded flannel and drove a used Toyota. He was so humble in appearance that once someone paid for his coffee at his favourite coffee shop because they had just assumed he couldn't afford it. Ronald died in 2014. His death as unassuming as his life appeared to be. Now, I say appeared. He shocked his neighbours after he'd gone by leaving $8 million, getting on for £6 million to the local library and hospital. The money, the result of having a knack for playing the stock market. There are dozens of stories of people like this, the so-called secret or pauper millionaires, people who could live a life of luxury but don't even treat themselves to a slap-up meal once in a while. And for those who aren't rich, there is often a fascination with those who are. The goal of winning the lottery you hear so many people have is because, yes, they want to be free of financial burdens, but they also want to live the dream. For sure, there are the cautionary tales that suggest this dream might turn into a nightmare, but they are conveniently ignored as this week's ticket is purchased and popped in the pocket, dreams and hopes firmly in place. So when stories of people like John and Ronald are heard, it can blow your mind that they tantalizingly could live this dream, but don't. It's kind of frustrating that such people could have, at the very least, a comfortable life, but live a life little better or even worse than those who purchased the lottery tickets. When walking into the home of a multimillionaire, you want to be able to fantasize a little. You don't want or expect to see a modest 2-up, 2-down place that hasn't been decorated in 30 years. You want to vicariously experience what it is to not have to think twice about purchasing the very best that life has to offer. To see what it's like to be Jeff Bezos and order a yacht that's so big it needs a support yacht. I cannot do my job without a car. And one of those decisions I can't stand having to make is to decide when to keep it or sell it. It's the one decision I really wish I could delegate to an expert to relieve me of the burden of it all. You know, I try and be analytical about it, looking at the finances and the mechanics and the age, make and model of the car, and I pray and all that stuff. But there was always this degree of angst, knowing that if I get it wrong, it's going to cost a lot of money potentially, and I'm going to inevitably break down at the wrong time in the wrong place. And at the end of the day, it just seems to come down to a lot of guesswork and dare I say it, even luck. But if you're rich, there's no fretting over when to change your car. Just get another one and build a bigger garage. I have a book on my Amazon wish list that costs £75. And wish is the right word to use here because I know I am probably never going to buy it. But if you're rich, One imagines you can go to an actual bookshop and you can act like a child in a sweet shop, grabbing books here, there, and everywhere, even if they're only vaguely of interest. And you do this because you know that your next job is to organise a home extension with mahogany shelving to put them all in. If we're that way inclined, we want rich people to show us how life could be, if only. What I don't think Paul wants to see in his community here in Philippi is what Rich Villadus calls a Jesus station. A place where the saints or wannabe saints are anxiously waiting on the Lord's return, shaking in expectation of the judgment to come. A group whose faith has done nothing more than to make them cower and tremble under the inadequate lead-lined roofs of tradition and form as the storms of sin, injustice and evil rage around them. Why? Why? Because this is the metaphorical church community equivalent of a two-up, two-down place that hasn't been decorated in living memory. A community that gets by doing no more than barely existing. And here's the thing. They do this despite the riches on offer. When we step through the imaginary door of the church about which Paul is dreaming, what will we see? Will we see a group that is more focused on themselves than others? Will we see individuals fighting their own corner? Or will we see a group of people who are accessing the very best that life has to offer? Will we see Rosie and Russ despondently ploughing their own paths towards salvation? Or will we see something more profound and wonderful that will inspire others to also want to live and experience the dream? You see, Paul's not writing to individuals concerned and fretting about their future destiny. He's writing to a community of Jesus followers in the here and now. This sentence is written in the present tense. And listen to this carefully, and if you listen to nothing else I have to say, maybe listen to this. He is writing to a community of Jesus followers who are already saved because Jesus Christ died and has risen on their behalf, because they have accepted the future gift of eternal life in the present, a future gift given by grace through faith in the faithfulness of Jesus, because they understand they can do nothing, absolutely nothing to contribute towards their own salvation, because they believe righteousness comes by faith and not through works. Paul is writing to a group here where he feels bold enough to say in Philippians 1:6, I am confident. I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. This is not a group focused on themselves, worried about being saved. This is a group in which the assurance of salvation runs rife. But what about that work thing then? Because Paul uses the word work, and then for we who are Protestants, he uncomfortably puts it next to, even links it to salvation. So we can't get away from work. It's just a question of what to work at, I guess. The New Living Translation helps us at this point. It translates the phrase, work out your salvation, in fear and trembling in the following way. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. Note the helpful change in emphasis here. It's not working to gain salvation that Paul is talking about. It's working to enjoy the benefits of salvation now. And now we can breathe another sigh of relief. Because he's suggesting that we work to enjoy the benefits of salvation now within community. And it has to be within community, because we can't stand side by side without others being present. We can't put others' interests first. We can't think of others as better than ourselves. We can't be truly humble on our own. These are a group of people in Philippi who have the potential and the means to live life to the full, who can live the dream, who can flourish as human beings, being recreated and transformed into the image of God because they are saved, not to be saved. And the potential for this is amazing. The potential for this is paradigm shifting. And this is seen in what comes next. For in verse 14, Paul says, well, if they do all these things without murmuring and arguing, so that they are blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the middle of a crooked and perverse generation. If they do all this stuff, here it comes. Here's the knock-on effect. Here's the shift. He says, if they do this, they will shine like stars in the world. They will shine like stars. Wow. This state of being is such that Paul is saying that they cannot help but stand in contrast to what is going on around them. He is laying before them a state of being that cannot help but impact the wider community, that cannot help but make them stand out for good reasons. Went out with one of the groups I've gotten involved with here on the island. You know, you get into conversations with people, have chats, and inevitably you get round to what I do for a living. Now, I know there are some clever answers to that question out there. Some pastors say stuff like, I'm a people developer, or I'm in the business of transformation. Here, I usually simply say, I am a minister, and then wait for the reaction I know is coming. And I'm doing this here because I found that people are just kindly curious. They're just naturally inquisitive and will want to know, where the churches are that I'm involved with, maybe what the denomination is, what I do every day, all that sort of stuff. But on 2 occasions, the response has been, oh, okay. Are you here to recruit members? Now, they both pretended they were joking, but I wasn't convinced. There once was a church that was running a Feed the Homeless program, something more and more of our churches have gotten involved with over the recent years, it seems. And this is fantastic. It's a valuable way to help those who have less and live on the margins in society. However, to get to this particular church's food, there was a requirement. You see, you had to sit through a Bible study first, and then you could eat. The light, if we can even call it that, the light that Christians have a reputation for shining, is one with hidden agenda. One where we're seen to want to grab people by the scruff of the neck and sit them in our pews. And so as we look to impact our communities, I think we have to consider why we are doing what we are doing. We have to ask ourselves, what's motivating us here? Is this all simply a public relations exercise? Are we looking to make a good name for the Seventh-day Adventist Church here in the south of England? Is it a sneaky way of making, and I really don't like this word, but is it a sneaky way of making contacts? Is the outcome work towards having a queue at the baptistry, backsides on seats, and increased income? If we do what we do with hidden agenda, people aren't stupid. They're going to see straight through us. Are you here to recruit members? Are you after my money? It's not starlight that people will see. It's light that's artificial, flattering to deceive. So alternatively, can our motivation come from being a people who are saved, who are working to put others first, embodying what society can indeed struggle to achieve, experiencing authentic community, where it is not so much about what drives us, but is the natural outcome of who we are, because we cannot help do what we do, and so we shine like stars. Because it strikes me that here in this passage in Philippians, there is an answer to that perception of hidden agenda that we might struggle with. There is a reason we go out and feed the hungry and clothe the naked and visit those in prison and stand up against injustice and give voice and space to the marginalized. It is because by the grace of God and through the power of the Spirit, that is simply the sort of people we are. That is simply the sort of community that we are because of Jesus. Communities where the interests of others are so important to us, we provide food. Communities where we instinctively put others first, so we offer clothing. And we do all this. We do all these things because that is who we are, and not because it's just something we do, in other words. As we not only work out the benefits of salvation amongst ourselves, we cannot help but extend those benefits unconditionally towards those around us. In the same way that God's love is high and wide and deep and unending and overflowing, so it is for we who are challenged to be of the same mind when it comes to our love of neighbour. I realise that I'm dreaming along with Paul a little bit here. I realise that reality can kick in, and so this challenges us profoundly. I also realised that if we let the cat out of the bag, people might be struck by how absurd our situation is. That when we get to the time of Revelation 19, 20, 21, that they will be in shock when they realise what we had, but kept it stored up for later, making everything about the time to come and living unnecessarily like we're scraping by in the present. Maybe they'll hear about what it is to live the life of a Jesus follower within community, and by the way, that's a disciple. And so they'll get to understand the riches that come now with having Jesus as Lord of our life and being saved through him, that they'll understand the possibilities of being the body of Christ and the household of faith and a living temple in which the Spirit of God dwells. And having learned how amazing this all is, they will pause and scratch their heads because they'll see a 2-up, 2-down house that hasn't been decorated in years. Because they'll walk through the metaphorical door of our communities, expecting to see a mansion and people living the dream, experiencing meaningful relationships, embodying peace and love. But they're brought up short. And so they move to say, here's the classic case of Christians who live like paupers. You can't help but feel sorry for the way they lead their lives, especially when they don't need to. Feel so sad for them. Oh, well, perhaps they can't help it. Or will we shine like stars? Will we allow God to turn this dream into reality so we don't have to imagine being a community of those who are saved because of Jesus? We don't have to imagine being part of a community where who we are informs how we behave. We don't have to imagine being part of the community where the love for neighbour overflows beyond the boundaries of our church, and where the benefits of being saved extend beyond the walls that Jesus himself is breaking down. So we don't have to imagine being Christians who have been made rich because we are saved by Jesus. So we don't have to imagine that others can't wait to get a glimpse of our communities so they can see how life could be. If only. If only. Amen.
Hear the call of the kingdom, lift your eyes. will